During the NBA draft lottery, the unthinkable happened, and the Atlanta Hawks, who finished as the 10th seed in the East and had the 10th worst record in the league, managed to win the draft lottery and acquire the first overall pick in the draft. This helped give the Hawks organization new hope because the last 3 seasons they're a mediocre team that couldn't shy away from finishing the season between the 7th through 10th seed in the East. This did grant them a spot in the play-in tournament, allowing them to have a chance of making the playoffs. Although it didn't end with anything spectacular, because they would either make the playoffs as a lower seed and lose in the first round, or just lose their games in the play-in tournament and not make the playoffs at all. This led to people questioning what they should do with their roster this season and wondering if they would trade one of their star players in Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. The funny thing about this situation is that Atlanta traded for Murray to contend in the Eastern Conference, but all it ended up doing was continuing their path of having a ceiling of losing in the first round of the playoffs. Now that they have the first pick in the draft, this lets them approach their situation differently and be able to make a choice on what they would want to do with their team. I still believe that the Hawks need some type of change with their roster and shouldn't run it back with the same team just because they have the number 1 pick. Adding one talented player in the draft won't fix their issues, and I think they should instead end the era of both having Trae Young and DeJounte Murray on their team. They should really consider going to a rebuild and start from scratch, which is something they can do from a lot of teams willing to give them draft capital and even young players for some of the people on their roster. Players like Trae Young, Clint Capella, DeJounte Murray, and Bogdan Bogdanovic will be valuable trade pieces for their team and help Atlanta start their rebuild. The Hawks already have a lot of young players on their team as well, so they are already in the right direction to become a young and developing team. These players include Jalen Johnson, AJ Griffin, Kobe Buffkin, and Onyeka Okongwu. From giving these players and the player they select in the draft more minutes or reps during games in the regular season, it will help develop their understanding of the game and allow them to learn from their mistakes. However, this won't be possible with the team already having proven veterans that have already reached their potentials on the team, which is why trading their experienced players is the best way for the rebuild to work. An example of a player getting better from getting more minutes is with Jalen Johnson, who is going to his 4th year in the NBA. He played great last season with him averaging 16 points and 8.7 rebounds, showing flashes of one of the key players the Hawks can build around. It took Johnson until year 3 in the NBA to prove himself because he had to sit behind former Hawks player John Collins until he was traded to the Jazz. Once Collins left Atlanta, Jalen Johnson got to the starting lineup and obtained more minutes, where he showed people that he was turning to one of their best players. This is why Atlanta should focus their time on a rebuild rather than retooling their roster, because then they will be able to see all their youthful players' potential. It just seems like it will be easier for Atlanta to figure out the potential of all the young players on their team and see which of them they can structure their team around. We've seen the Golden State Warriors try to create a roster with a mixture of young and veteran players on their team so they could have a good team in the present and future. Rather than trading away the draft capital and young players for players that could help them win now, they instead kept them on the team. Even though they won a championship in 2021, it was mainly because of their big 3 of Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson, who already knew what it took to win a championship since they were in 5 finals before that season. They also have one of the greatest point guards in the NBA on their team in Steph Curry, which gives them a chance to win any game against any team. Last season they finished as the 10th seed and didn't even make the playoffs after losing to the Sacramento Kings in the play-in tournament. From a decline in play from some of their veteran players in Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Kevon Looney, as well as trying to develop some of their young players like Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, and Trayce Jackson-Davis. This combination has turned the Warriors into a shell of their former selves and led to them wasting their championship window. Atlanta is sort of in the same situation as Golden State as a team that has a balance of young and experienced players. However, the difference between the two is that their team is less talented than the Warriors, which is why they will be in a better position if they start over and trade their veteran players. No matter if the Hawks decide to retool or rebuild their team, both options have their advantages and can work well for their organization. I just hope they make some sort of change to their team and not just keep their roster the same way it is, because they are overdue for a fresh start.